Hello. Won't you join me now in the world of Glastonbury Romance Part 7? Philip's thoughts were like far-flung hooks piercing the gills of some monstrous fate leviathan that he had been resolved to harness to his purpose. He visualized his factory at Wookiee Hole. He visualized those stalactites and stalagmites in the famous caves there and saw them lit with perpetual electricity. He remembered how he had stood alone there once by the edge of that subterranean river flowing under the Witch's Rock, and how he had felt a sensation of power down there beyond anything he had ever known. These Norwich investments are nothing, he thought. These overtaxed properties are nothing. The three big mortgages are the thing. 40,000 they'll sell for. He's left them to me. I feel it, I sense it, I know it. Besides, he promised grandmother. He confessed that to me himself. What a good thing he died when he did. Never again shall I have to listen to that voice of his reading Licinius? Old epicure. I can see him now, putting cream into his porridge and looking out so voluptuously across his garden. Living for his sensations. That's what he did all his days. Putting cream into his porridge, reading his poetry, living for his sensations. What a life for a grown man. The life of a frog in a lily pond. Aunt Elizabeth is sorry now he's dead, but she didn't like it when Johnny Garrett became the favorite. She was quickly cleared out. He must have fancied himself a lot over that. Must have thought he was converted to a Methodist to the true doctrines. Old fantastically brained crotchety ass. I shall rebuild the Wookiee Hole plan entirely. That's take about 10,000. That will leave 30,000 to play with. And by God, I'll play with it. 4,000 would have electricity beyond the actual known limits of every one of those caves. I'll do the plan for 10,000 and spend 5 on the caves. With 5,000 I could electrify the bowels of the Mendips. Mendips. Don't know what that means. What Philip felt at that second of time, when he imagined himself with all the electrical power of his disposal, standing among those prehistoric stalactites, would be hard to put into rational human speech. The drumming of a meteorite traveling through space would have expressed it. I, riding on electricity. I, I, grasping electricity. I, I, alone, all powerful, under the Mendips. Letting loose my will upon Somerset, my factories above, my electricity beneath. I, Philip Crow, planting my will upon the future, molding men, dominating nature. So in the book, if you want to see, it looks like that. So I tried my best. His hard gray eyes began to soften a little in his gaze, leaving Mr. Diddlington's face turned itself towards vacancy. I shall have a completely new sort of boat made to explore the subterranean river, he thought. Flatter than a barge, lighter than a canoe. I'll build an electrical engine for it, and I'll have myself floated under the Witch's Rock, and I'll make them leave me there. And I'll have that feeling. I'll make it work, too. I'll have water power for my plant run by the buried rivers in the heart of the Mendips. I'll electrify the caves of the Druids. I'll carry electricity deeper under the earth than anyone's ever done. How slowly this old ass reads. But Mrs. Elizabeth Crow, staring sometimes into the fire and sometimes out of the big window across the lawn, thought to herself, I should have had an easier life if I'd put up with Johnny Garrett and stayed with Father. She remembered how she had first seen this Glastonbury ex-preacher, whose mystical ideas got such a fatal hold on William Crow's mind, and on William Crow's heart. She had been visiting her mother in Switzerland, and when she came back, there he was, the Somersetshire revivalist, installed in Northwold Rectory. How his black eyes gleamed as he listened to Father's morning prayers. The man was fascinating in his own way. I can't blame Father for liking him. She could hear now her father's resonant voice repeating the great poetical chapters in Isaiah. Comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she hath received of the Lord's hands double for all her sin. And she could hear this charlatan interrupt an unheard of thing for a servant to do, and beg for another chapter of sacred rhetoric. Tillycrow's mind was neither conjuring up local legacies, nor brooding over ancient grievances. It was occupied entirely with minute problems connected with the larder, the pantry, the kitchen, in his own home at Glastonbury. In her own home. There was a certain shelf in the pantry that her housemaid always kept too crowded. Tillycrow could see now a particular stream of light in which the sun motes were wont to flicker when she entered that pantry after breakfast. This light always fell upon a suspended dishcloth, different from the rest, with a little green border, which she kept for drying her best china cups beneath when they had visitors. Then her mind left the pantry and made a journey of about a dozen feet to the larder. Here she saw with abominable vividness a blue-bottle fly. She maintained a special and constant warfare against these, walking along the edge of a shelf where the butter and cheese were kept. Not being able to endure this image with equanimity, she gave a sharp little shake off her head to drive it away, and as Mr. Didlington began a long list of freeholds in the parish of Thorpe, her adventurous mind took a daring leap to her Glastonbury drawing-room, where it concentrated upon the faded pink ottoman wherein she kept her wools. I must rely on the ottoman, she said to herself. There's the rent that Elizabeth's cat made. It always bothers me to see it. How sentimental Elizabeth looks staring out at the window. Oh, I hope the canon has left her enough money to go and live by herself in some nice seaside place. At this point in Tillycrow's thoughts, there came an image that she would have been very reluctant to put into words. But as a mere image in the void, brought to her by some housemaid of the air upon a silver tray, she gave herself up to it. This was the image of a solitary cup of tea carried up to her, with her letters, by Emma the cook, during a paradisiac paradise-ish holiday, when Philip, such was Tilly's further reach of felicity, had gone to stay for a whole fortnight with Aunt Elizabeth at that pleasant seaside place. But what was this? What words of fatal significance had fallen from the lips of Mr. Didlington? By what incantation had this roomful of grown-ups people been inconsistently jerked upon their feet, protesting, exclaiming, jeering, inquiring, denouncing, arguing, and by no means speaking gently of their grandfather Crow, who, for all that he was one of the chief causes of their being alive upon the earth, seemed to have turned into a deliberate enemy. Does it mean that none of us get a penny, not even Philip? Whispered Mary to John. Not a penny, the man from Paris answered. And what's more, Mary, I'll have to borrow 10 shillings from you to get out to Glastonbury. You'll want more than that, she gestured gravely. No, I shan't. I'm going to walk. 10 shillings is what I want. No more, not less. But I want it from you, and you'd better give it to me, now, if you've got your purse. For they're terribly excited, and it's best to be on the safe side. Mary fixed a very straight look upon him at this. But seeing that he was perfectly serious, he moved back a little towards the window and nodded to him to follow her. She moved back towards the window. How much money have you got left? Mary whispered. He searched his pockets thoroughly and produced 3 shillings and 4 pence. This sum he had out to her in his 2 hands as if she had demanded it of him. She shook her head. Put it back, she said. I'd better get some more for you. You can't walk all the way. I'm sure, Aunt Elizabeth. He pulled her nearer to him, interrupting her words. The massive green curtain on the left of the window, for the winter curtains had not been changed yet, hung in bulging folds against his shoulder. Mary looked long afterward remembered how exactly like a certain Venetian picture she had seen somewhere in his refined rogue's face looked against that background. I'm not going to take a penny from anybody but you, he whispered fiercely with a malicious gleam in his eye. I'll find you out at Glastonbury in a week or so, not longer than 2 weeks anyway, and then we'll see. I may sponge upon you like the devil then," he added, giving the girl a quick, searching look. "I have sponged on girls before. It's a way of life that seems to suit me." Mary showed her strong white teeth in a schoolgirl grin. Turning her back to the room, she drew out her purse and took from it 3 half-crowns, a florin, and a sixpence. "Miss Drew," she remarked, "doesn't pay very much. Philip doesn't give tips either. Aunt Elizabeth gave me this for pocket money." It would have been clear enough to any close observer that Mary derived an exultant happiness from handing over her pocket money to John in this childish manner. It would have also been clear that John's feelings were equally those of a romantic lover and a sly, unscrupulous tramp. "I'll ask Aunt Elizabeth if you can't sleep here tonight," whispered Mary, as they turned away from the darkening window. He made a wry face at her. "Don't you dare," he breathed. "I've got more than 3 shillings without touching your 10, and I've left my bag at the inn. I'll make them give me a room and breakfast for 2 nights for that. You'll see. I want to go with you to the big river tomorrow. We never went there together." Mary got red with excitement. "We did, John. You're forgotten, but I remember. We did just once." Their dialogue was interrupted by Philip's voice, which was not raised, but which was lowered to such a key of indrawn intensity that it compelled attention. He was now standing with his back to the fire, fronting Mr. Diddlington, who, with his fingers inserted between the loose pages of the calamitous will, swayed heavily and limply before him, like an obsequious but surly cynical whose account has proved faulty. "The whole of this 40,000 left absolutely to this man, and no chance of legal action. That, in short, is the situation?" Miss Diddlington began murmuring something in a husky, injured voice, but it was only the words "legacies" that reached the ears of John and Mary. "Damn your legacies," said Philip in the same tone. 200 a year from the Norwich property to my aunt, and 100 in cash to the servants. That's all of your precious legacies there are. The maddening thing is that it was Tilly and I who introduced that sly dog to grandfather." His voice changed a little, and he looked towards his wife. Tilly Crow had drawn up her thin legs in the great armchair, and, with her hands clasped so violently in her lap that her knuckles showed white, stared at him with frightened eyes. "Where is this thief, Tilly?" he said in a much gentler voice. "Where is this holy rascal who has fooled us all? The fact that he has displayed self-control enough to speak in a half-humorous tone was in itself sufficient to bring about the recovery of his equanimity. Why," he finally remarked, looking round with the air of a monarch addressing his courtiers after the loss of a battle, "why doesn't someone fetch this good religious man, and let me offer him our united congratulations?" "The furniture," murmured Tilly. "Did he say the furniture was to be divided equally? Does that mean, Philip, that we can't have that silver with your grandmother's crest on it? Ask them, Philip. Ask them now. They will give us the silver, won't they? And the linen? We don't want any more furniture, Philip, but these girls must let me have the linen. Tell them we don't want any heavy furniture, Philip. Tell them we want the silver and linen." Aunt Elizabeth herself rose heavily from her seat now. Her thoughts had been wandering away to Glastonbury, where 30 years ago she had been so fond of the youthful vicar of the place, who had jilted her to marry a maidservant. She completely disregarded Tilly and addressed herself to her nephew. "You are thinking only of your own affairs, Philip," she said sternly. She looked at him, as she spoke, without a trace of the respectful awe into which she had bullied the others. "Why don't you and Tilly congratulate me on my 200 a year?" There was a weight of character in Aunt Elizabeth when she was on her feet and confronting her nephew that enabled her to reduce his importance and to reduce his loss of £40,000. Mary pinched John's arm with delight and whispered to him something he could not catch. It was from the other young couple in the room, however, that the next words came. "Percy and I congratulate you, Aunt," cried Mr. Spear. "Yes, yes," echoed Persephone, straightening her shoulders and tossing her head. "And we hope you'll come out of the enemy's camp now and listen to wisdom." Miss Crow moved towards them, attracting attracted by something so kind in their tone that it surprised and disarmed her. "I'm in no enemy's camp, Percy," she murmured, putting her arm around the tall girl's waist. "I am an old-fashioned woman, and very fond of my dear nephew and niece. I know nothing about politics, any more than Mary does," she added, making an instinctive movement to bring the four young people together. John and Mary did not approach her. "Is there to be anybody's wisdom thrust upon Aunt Elizabeth?" John threw in. "I think mine would suit her best." "What do you mean by that, Mr. Crow?" said young Spear in an argumentative tone. "Yes, what do you mean, John?" repeated Persephone. "You don't mean that Dave and I would try and browbeat Aunt Elizabeth to force her to see the light, do you?" "The light, the light, the light, the light," cried John suddenly with a convulsed face. Aunt Elizabeth unconsciously started back a pace or two, dragging Persephone, whose waist she still held, back with her. For there was something about Percy's slender figure that provoked people to touch her and made it difficult to let her go. But John's face smoothed itself out in the second, and the humblest apologies flowed from it. "It's my French mischief coming out, Dave Spear," he said. "It's all acquired cynicism. Really, I love to think that there are people with strong convictions, people who know they are right, like you and Cousin Philip." Oh, I ran a little bit over that time. Starting to get into it. So some fighting over the will. It looks like a vicar who the grandfather fell under the spell of is getting all the money, and that vicar also dated at some point Aunt Elizabeth. I hope everybody's doing well and enjoying their, what was that phrase? The putting cream in your porridge as we stay in quarantine. And I'll see you next time in part 8. Cheers for now.